Texas Lutheran University.
So today, it's a great pleasure to welcome John Blount from he's the CEO and president of Pure and Gentle Soap here in Seguin, and he has worked with many of our faculty here on various research projects, so he's a well-known commodity here at TLU, and he's going to tell you about why
All right. Well, first off, thank you, Bob. Thank you for inviting me here. I enjoy this campus. It's my adopted campus. I went to dear old Texas A&M. I saw that, but we've had now 6 TLU alum come through our facility, and we've kept 2 of them, both in chemistry, and I will announce that we are still looking for a part-time lab tech, so I'm soliciting right now. If anybody is interested, come see me after the seminar. But I'm going to try to make this brief, succinct. It's Friday afternoon. Everybody has something to do. And what I'd like to talk to you about today, I think it's very important, is to find out why we do certain things, why we get up in the morning, what motivates us. From my standpoint, and I'll tell you just a brief background. I have a bachelor's degree in biochemistry, and then I got my master's degree in chemical engineering from A&M, and worked for a Procter & Gamble subsidiary for about 8-9 years, hence why I'm in the soap business, I guess, and personal care business. And I would suspect many of you went into your curriculum, into your field, primarily because of the money. I went from biochemistry to chemical engineering. Guess why? Because chemies get paid a lot. And then I use more biochemistry than I do chemical engineering right now. And so the moral of the story is that you really want to follow your passion. You really want to figure out why you're doing certain things. And I don't know if any of you, I'm going to switch gears over here. Did I point right? Okay, here we go. If I would recommend, if you have not read anything of Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, I recommend doing that. He talks about, and I'll draw up here, he talks about the why, the how, and then the what. And I'm not going to plagiarize him a lot, but the why is where you want to start in anything. This is more iconic in business and more in the entrepreneurial end of it. Why do we do what we do? And you will get very good at what you do if you focus on the why. What most people do is and what most companies do is they start with the what. And I can give you an example of that, and I'll give you several of them in a minute. But Apple is, I'm sure most have iPhones over here. That's Apple. You wait in line to go and pick up your phone or to pick up your TV or camp out a couple of days. Apple has it down. They start with the why they're in business. They're going to make things that are elegant, that are easy to use, that are consumer friendly. How they do that is they hire the best people. They get the best materials. And then, oh, by the way, we make phones. Oh, by the way, we make computers. We make TVs. It doesn't really matter. They can fit anything they want into that what. We as consumers will stand in line or camp out to buy it because they got that why down. An example of how this doesn't work is you think of the MP3 players way back when. You had the iPod, which is still very popular, but the one that was contra to that was called the Zoom or Zumba or whatever. And they started with the what. It's going to have this much storage, it's going to do this, etc. And the iPod, they had a silhouette of a girl with frizzy hair dancing and having the earplugs on, and guess which one survived? So it's because they knew the why. They knew why they were in business. And bringing that into what you guys should do, and what you is certainly in your development part of your education and in your career, you really need to think about why you're doing what you're doing. Don't get too metaphysical, but really think about it in terms of what motivates you to get out of bed in the morning. You know, why do I want to get up today? What drives you to become an expert in your field? What drives Dr. Jonas, Dr. Bray? They want to somehow get that knowledge into your head. and that's what drives them. That's what makes them the expert in their field. So, and it's always the why, not the what, that drives us. It's that passion. It's what we do. And forgive me if I screw up this physiology and anatomy, but Sinek says that this is more of biology rather than psychology, because he said if you took an axial cut of the brain, this is more the limbic part and this is the neocranium, and so the limbic part is what gives us our warm, fuzzy feeling and makes us make decisions. Did I get that right? Anybody? I'm a Chem E, man. Give me a break. All right. So, and as I started the conversation, I told you about the money being the motivator. It's typically the result of the why. It is not why you get into a career. You will get burnout. You will want to change careers. You will be mediocre at what you do if you don't have that passion, if you're not good. The money will come, I promise you. But make sure that you have that why down. I like talking with people rather than at them, so any questions, comments so far? Why not? Okay. Richard Branson, he's the guy who, Virgin Airlines, everybody kind of knows him, blonde-headed, 80-year-old hippie, I don't know. So, but he made a very, or had a very profound statement specifically on entrepreneurs, and I fit into that category. Their drive is not about making money, it's more about making a difference in somebody's life. I can tell you this from personal experience. When I first started my business, which was a long time ago, it was 35 years ago, I went 3 years without a paycheck. So it certainly wasn't for the money. And I can tell you that unequivocally. I can tell you this also, that the individuals that are standing up on stage at Oslo, Norway, who received that Nobel Prize, the women in the formal gowns and the men in the rented tuxes, I'm sure, they're not doing it for the money. It's because they know why they got up. They know why they're doing things. It's very important. So, some of the things, and I'll relate this more to business practices because this is the sandbox that I play in, so I can tell you this unequivocally. And in addition to that, you can see some of these examples. They may not be in your history, but they're certainly in some of ours. And the difference between a transactional type business and one that's relational or social. The transactional, they're just in it for the money. That's all they're there for. Whereas the relational or social, they're there to help that person, to make a difference in them. You can look at some examples up here that I cited on General Motors in the 70s and 80s. They had 80% of the market share. Many of us remember that here, that are old enough to remember that. And through some genius over in GM, I don't know who it was, they decided to make all their cars the same body, and one would have a Cadillac emblem, and the other one would have a Buick emblem, and another one would have a Chevy emblem, and they messed it up. And they lost about 30% of their market share. It's because they became very transactional. They were worried about the money, the bottom line, but ultimately it came back to bite them. The banking industry, 2007, 2008, you guys remember, y'all are old enough to remember the crash then. I'm sure it was not good. It wasn't fun for anybody. It wasn't fun for certainly our business, but it was primarily because they became very greedy. It was something that they decided to do that was more transactional than relational. What would work best for that consuming group? What would work best for that person? Even if they could not afford a mortgage, they still gave them one. And so the end result was a very dramatic crash that affected a lot of people in negative ways. IBM, they were truly the apple of their day. I mean, that was when you bought an IBM computer, you didn't buy an Apple. I mean, that was unheard of. And then some genius over there decided that what their whole function should be, instead of making businesses work efficiently, which should have been their why, they decided to make big computers. That didn't work out so well. And they didn't think through their why. Nokia. You know, who has a flip phone? Anybody? All right, Bob does. All right, I'll take back that question. But the same thing with them. They needed to really rethink on what they did, on why they were in business. And they were in business primarily to make communication easier. And then they got taken over by both Apple, who I explained earlier, their philosophy, and then certainly Samsung, who came in and kind of filled that void. And these are some business examples, because like I said, that's the sandbox I play in. Insurance companies, they truly have forgot, I still think they're like that, but they've forgot what really their function is, and that is to help a consumer, not to pad their commission. And they will oversell, they will do things that they shouldn't, and so consequently a lot of the smaller ones, because of their greed, because of their overall lack of focus on why they're in business, they end up going out of business. I can tell you personally from our customer base, specifically in 2007 and 2008, the customer base that we have in our business who was very relational, who was very social, ended up surviving. The ones that were transactional, they went out of business because you could survive. People want to do business. People want to be around people like that. What did I do? Okay. So the whole moral of the story, once again, is don't lose sight of your why. It'll truly provide you with every guiding principle that you want and need in life. It's very important that you focus on that you really think through what you're doing. And it should not be solely for the monetary gain of it. It may be up front, certainly that's enticing. I, for one, did that. I'm glad I got my ChemE degree, but I would have probably done better with biochem. And if I would have thought my why through, I would have done that. So, because I use it more. It informs people around you your reason for being. Anybody who's around me for 10 seconds is going to find out I'm really tuned in. I really like the environment. We had that discussion, and I'm very much a environmental hawk, if you will. And so they kind of know that, so they don't really try to argue with me about too much stuff like that. I'm not that bad, so I'm not that much of a zealot. It determines your behavior on how well you do things, because truly if you have your why down, you will exceed, or you're going to really care about. I mean, I read about my cellular structure in the evenings. Why do I do that? Because it's my passion. It's what I love to do. Learn about different amphoterics or different surfactant things going on in my industry, as very much you guys do, because it's your passion. It's what you do. It's why you do it. And it reflects your values. It truly does. If you can see through an individual who is very transactional in what they're doing. It doesn't take too much to figure it out. You don't have to be overly sensory gifted to figure that one out. So, and it determines the type of people that you hang out with. You're typically not going to hang out with some sleazebag that is like that. And I mean that in a nice way. And from my standpoint, because I hire people, it determines the type of people that I hire, because I want them to share the same values. I want them to understand their why. Or if you're going to be employed by a group that is the type of company, your why better match with theirs, or you're going to end up in a bad place somewhere in your career. And now, my why. And I started out really telling you what I do. I didn't ever went to the why. I did the cardinal sin of what Cynic says not to do. But it was really planned. My why is that our company provides eco-safe, eco-healthy products. That's what we do. That's why I get up in the morning. And everything we do evolves around that. How we do that. One, we hire very talented people to do product development and to make sure that we do things in a eco-friendly way. Two is that we go through what's called a life cycle inventory, to where we take every single aspect of making that product, from what the transportation footprint is, to the packaging footprint, to the ultimate disposal of it by the consumer in there. And we look at that and see how we can make it better. Everything we do is focused on that. Every ounce of energy that we have in every product that we make is that way. And oh, by the way, what we make personal care and home care and stuff like that. So that's my why. And I'll leave you with this, and I told you it was going to be very short, and so hopefully you will have some questions and answers on why. I think every one of you guys, especially if you're in the maths and sciences, are going to end up in some career field where you can truly make a difference. All of us middle-aged people, right? Yeah, kind of close. We've all had barriers in our life in one shape or form. I promise you we have. I promise you we've had hardships. I can't think of anybody who hasn't, and you just overcome them. But our hardships that I think, from at least what is my perspective, have been more local. It's something that we could overcome with some money or something like that. You guys are going to have some different hardships. I think you're going to have it harder, and I mean that sincerely. You're going to have some systemic things occur that you may not be able to control internally but externally because of your brain power, because you are in STEM, because you are in the sciences. And figuring out that why and figuring out how you can be beneficial to society is going to be very important. And I'm talking about things like climate change, things like pandemics, things like that. And I don't mean to get biblical and catastrophic on you, but these will occur. And I feel very confident that, you know, the younger generation that I've worked with at least seems to be able to certainly solve a lot of these problems. So that's it. I told you I'd be succinct. Thank you for inviting me. Questions, comments? Yes, ma'am. A&M, man.
In what ways have you made your products more eco-friendly? Like examples, I guess.
Well, a couple of ways. One is that we try to use plant-derived raw materials. In fact, we don't try, we do. And the reason for that is that plants use CO2, and then there's kind of a natural flux between any CO2 that you would emit in your processing, and that's somehow balanced out. The other way is that we try to minimize our packaging, and we do that by concentrating the products as much as possible to where they could get reconstituted with water at the consumer end. That way your footprint on your transportation is a lot less, and in addition to that, your packaging is reduced substantially. And then we do other things like if we're going to ship it out, UPS or whatever, the packing peanuts that we use are cornstarch, the cardboard that we use is recycled, the ink on our labels is soy-based ink. So we go to links that whatever we can. If we don't know it, it's just ignorance, you know, that we have to figure out somewhere else. We truly try to do what we can to make our products as eco-friendly, as eco-healthy as we can make it. Yes, sir.
What was it like going into the business world, having a background in STEM?
Tough. It was very tough, and I mean that sincerely, simply because I think most individuals in the science, we deal with facts, we deal with data, and you wait till your first salesperson. All that goes out the door. You're sitting there, you say, what did I just hear? And it truly was in terms of that. And then in addition to that, you have to be able to deal with, and I don't mean this in a condescending way, I truly don't, but you're going to have to deal with individuals at different levels, and so you may have to deal with a floor person that's driving a forklift, and next week with a PhD nuclear physicist, and you have to be that nimble in what you're doing, and because that's just the nature of the beast. But that was difficult for me because I was in a research and development group at P&G, and I was the only one without a posthole digger or PhD in that group. and then being thrown in with, you know, well, the truck driver didn't show up today. And you just have to deal with it. And so, yeah, you have to learn that very quickly. So, and then I tell everybody I don't have an MBA, but mine costs me more than anybody I know. so, yes, ma'am.
What made you switch? Because it sounded like you went in to chemical engineering and all of that with what in mind? So, like, when did you come to the realization of, like, you needed to find a why?
Well, especially when I was in product development at P&G. I mean, I was the token engineer over there simply because I could then take their whiz-bang products and then put them into a process some way. But these guys and ladies smoked me. I mean, I felt like the village idiot sometimes. They were just incredibly smart. And I would just, just say, man, I should have done this. And they would think of things a little bit more systemic than I did, or system-wise than I did, in terms of how things were put together. And then mine was, more mechanical. And so, yeah, I can make that. Yeah, I can add this heat exchanger to this, and and add this reactor to that, and we can end up with this. But they did the true hard science. I just cleaned it up. They did the operation, I stitched it up. And that was really the basis of it. Yes, ma'am.
I know you said that you didn't take a paycheck for like the first 3 years. So my question is, like, how did you keep your company alive? Because I know that being eco-friendly, environmental friendly takes a lot of time and research and thus money. So how did you get that support to keep it alive and keep people wanting to buy your product?
Well, a couple of things. One is that I certainly wasn't neophytic in that. That was my fourth recession that I went through since I've been in business. So I kind of knew what to do in terms of downsizing. We never laid anyone off. But when I say downsizing, I'm talking about our people would, and this is a testimonial to our group. When they say your people are your best asset in a business, that is absolutely true. But instead of laying off people would take reduced hours so other people would have hours to work. That's incredible. We allowed them voluntarily to do that, but that's a big sacrifice to do that. The business, we just reached out and we tried to do what we could to rekindle that business. I always say this as a joke after we talk about all the environmental aspects of our products. I was saying, yeah, it has nutritional value. If I sell it, I get to eat. and at that time, it wasn't too far off. But what I think you have to do too, from a business perspective, is that you can't live beyond your best month. I mean, that's where I think individuals get in trouble. You have to remain very frugal. You have to remain very conscious about what's going on. For me, I went 9 months during that period without a paycheck, so my people would. But fortunately, I had enough nuts stored away to where I could do that. And you have to be if you do decide to go into some type of business, you have to be very conscious of that. You don't need a new vehicle. I'll say my age, I'm 63 years old, and I bought my first new vehicle just recently, and I'm okay with that. and it doesn't matter to me. And I think you just have to do that.
So how do you try to get consumers? So if I see two products, and one is yours and one is someone else's, and because a lot of times consumers typically don't care of the efforts or how eco-friendly it is. So how do you try to make them choose your product?
Well, one of the things that you have to do is that, and this is more of a marketing aspect, but it also ties into chemistry and it ties into the sciences, is that there's an old adage that you either differentiate or you die. And you do that in marketing. And you have to differentiate your product to where you're telling the story, and you tell it however you can. Simple things like our laundry soap that we sell. We make ours without optical brighteners, so say no to the glow. And we have the little ultraviolet light, and they can see that. And then the other thing we do is that we'll put a different enzyme package in there, both a protease and an amylase, to where we can do things on normal pollens that are attracted to clothes, especially some of the natural weaves like cottons and wools, like pet, not necessarily pet dander, but normal pollens, and it didn't dust mite, it's their feces, but everybody got through eating, I'm sure. Don't worry about it. But anyway, we put an enzyme package in there that'll break that up. And so that is a story that you can tell. And then that helps your product being differentiated into the marketplace. And you look at that from a technical standpoint. You're constantly looking at some type of technical review to see what the best available technology is, what's the newest, most innovative raw material, and then you find out the functionality of it, and you say, I wonder if you can put this in there. And then I get one of our chemists, TLU alum, to, hey, why don't we try this? And then we see if it's a dog or a dog with fleas, we don't do anything with it. But if it's something that's marketable, then we try to, we have the advantage now with the internet and some of the social things to where we can test market things, and we can do it very quickly. And you can have a virtual store, and then you can see how many hits and looks and stuff like that. And we have a lot of analytics that go into our website to where if somebody just bounces on it, we can tell. And so, we had this many looks, we had this many buys, et cetera. You may not even have any of the product made, but you have a photo and you did it already in the lab, and so you can. And so it's a brave new world when it comes to that. And it's actually pretty neat because you can test market without it being very costly.
Anything else? I think visiting different medical schools. I mean, many of you have medical school in your future, and this idea of why is even trickling down there. When you think of someone like the Dell Medical School in Austin, they have a whole different philosophy of medical training, and they're not looking for just anybody who wants an MD degree. They want somebody who has certain characteristics, and so I think this is very important that you consider. Why do I want to do what I want to do? And put that into perspective. So let's thank John again for his.
Thank you, guys.
For more information, please visit tlu.edu.